All right, we're back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast, and today we've got a guest episode and a real treat with a close friend of ours in the Junto men's group, and has become a close friend, though new to the group. He's not new anymore. He's making an impact, and we're just lucky to sit down and have a conversation together. I know we've had multiple conversations separately, but looking forward to introducing Robert Oglesby to the listeners. And Robert is a very experienced entrepreneur working in the appraisal space, leading other organizations, and then starting his own appraisal company and exiting, which we will get to talking all about that fun stuff. But first of all, Robert, how are you doing today?
Doing great, guys. Appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's an honor to be part of that Junto team, man. It's such a cool thing. I wish I'd have done it a decade ago. Gosh, just cool to be around studs like you guys. So it's just awesome. Thank you.
It's awesome to have you in the group. It's awesome to have you on this podcast. Phil and I have been running this weekly for 2 years, and you're going to be our first guest episode in the triple digits. So that's a big milestone for us. But what's a milestone? Yeah. What's exciting is having guests like you on and jumping into your story. You've had a lot of really cool ups and downs. And I can't remember who brought you into the Junto group. Who introduced you to the first meeting? How'd you get involved?
Gallagher.
Yeah. Gallagher. Good old Gallagher, Toro Insurance. He was a guest on the pod way back
when. Friend of the pod.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so how did you know Gallagher? How did you guys get connected?
Well, he's obviously a big insurance guy. So I would say that we've known each other, and he's had some policies of mine back when I was running that larger company for years. But he was always at events, the same type of events that I was at. So we were always marketing to the same clientele. So we'd be at happy hours, things like that together. Always respected him, and he's always just had a positive attitude, just super nice guy. Yeah.
He's awesome. But I mean, that brings us to you and kind of how you were into networking and all that stuff in the appraisal space, real estate, all that. I mean, you started an appraisal company back in 2003. So take us back a little bit, give us your little backstory, then what prompted you to want to get into that industry and ultimately start your own business?
Yeah. It's crazy how I ended up in that space, but I'll try to make it quick. And I'm sure, every entrepreneur's got these stories, but my story this is kind of not at the beginning, but kind of in the middle of it. I was in the restaurant industry, where I went about 3 weeks without seeing my wife. And I'd already had a taste of the appraisal business. So my family does it in Michigan. On my wife's side, and I had some other real estate dealings with family in Michigan, Virginia. And I was working for Cheesecake Factory, so I was a manager of Cheesecake Factory and literally did not see my wife for 3 weeks. And she was a store manager for Gap. And we were living in California, ironically, which was a very short period of my life. And I just told her, I'm done. We are not going to have this kind of lifestyle. And I quit from there and really had no money, no funds, and just started training in that industry, working hard, and got connected with some people, worked my way up, got licensed, spent time with somebody for about 2 years, was going to go in business with that person. We had some disagreements, and I just started the company from there. And literally worked 6-7 days a week, just like every other entrepreneur, working hard. And 90% of it was meeting the right people, working hard, learning all the principles. There's no magic pill, and there was some luck, right? I come across the right people that gravitated to what we were doing, and the company grew from there. So that's kind of the roots of it. And that was back in late 90s, early 2000s, once I got out of the military. And that's how it rolled up.
When you talk about the appraisal process, business, and those learnings, what are some of the most common misunderstandings that people have about appraisals, like sentimental value versus market value, comparables, uniqueness, and comps? What are some of the most fundamental things that you learned? Because you hear all these stories about every human believes they're so special, their property's so special.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of an appraisal. What are some of those common misunderstandings, and how do you navigate those? And what was that learning process like?
Well, I mean, there's multiple real property assets. We all know that, right? You go out to eat. There's a restaurant aspect, right? There's a business. There's real property tied to that. I've got 98% of my experiences in the single family space and 2 to 4 unit space. So I'm mainly a residential guy, which is the majority of certified appraisers in the country. But there are other appraisers that strictly work on commercial, and those assets are wide. I mean, you can get into almost tons of things, and every asset's got its own nuances. The residential space is very emotional. So we are buying a property, most consumers, based on an emotional response, whether it be location, size of a home, the condition of a home. We love that kitchen, whatever the case may be. So those influences do create a stream of data that's out there. But what happens with most consumers understanding our process is the appraiser is not technical. They visit a property. It's an observation. Even though we commonly use the word inspection, it's really not an inspection. We are observing the property. If I came out to your guys' properties today, I can't tell you if the drywall, I can see it, and if the drywall looks funky and it may be installed wrong, and I can see that, but I can't tell you from a code standpoint if it was installed correctly. And that's not my role. My role is to observe those improvements and see how they fit into the market. So that's a big misconception. And everybody, including myself, we all think our properties are worth more than others. It's just how it is.
Exactly.
We're just emotionally like that. We're built that way.
Yeah.
A lot of pride, right? You know, you go out and build that beautiful pool that you slaved over or whatnot, and you worked really hard to do, and the market may not appreciate it as much as you do. So it's just commonly what happens.
Well, I was just going to ask about design trends. Like, okay, so you had it was called Appraisal Tech, is the name of the business that you founded in 2003. Yes. And sold in 2022. So that's like 20 years. And there's a lot of different, like I remember growing up and my mom put wallpaper everywhere. No one puts wallpaper on their house in their houses anymore. So when you're appraising a home, you know, you have to kind of be a little bit more forward thinking, I would imagine. So how is that to deal with when design
you have to be knowledgeable about current trends in every market. And you know, when we commonly use the word market in real estate, and we kind of use it and we abuse it, because a market can be multiple things. I mean, and generally you start off with a location, and then there's a property type within a market. So you could have a neighborhood that you guys might live in, and there could be 10 markets within that neighborhood. Common one that's very easy for me to explain is like Paradise Valley generally has about 7 to 8 markets within it. And those markets relate to location. Number one, like, is it a hillside lot, non-hillside lot? Is it a estate lot? Are we new construction or are we older? So there's lots of different things that go into that scenario. And then the appraiser is expected to be knowledgeable on those trends and certain things that affect value in that market, and has to report and analyze. And so at the end of the day, we're data junkies. But we're not data junkies where everything is perfect. No market's perfect. You're going to get different answers in your sampling of data. And then we have to put our hat on and reconcile that data. And that's where the appraiser can get the consumer can look a little subjective. So as an example, I come out and appraise your house for XYZ. You have appraiser Joe come out and they appraise it for a different number. Why is that? It's because, especially in the residential space, there's just larger variances because there's more emotional buying than there is scientific buying. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Follow-on question to that. How do the relationships work with the realtors? Because you often obviously get into conflict of interest scenarios, who recommends who, long-time relationship. How do those dynamics typically work out?
Well, I mean, so appraisers have a client, and 90% of appraisers' clients are generally lenders. There are some appraisers, including myself, to do a lot of what we call private appraisals, or clients that are non-lending based. So when we have a lending based client, such as ABC Bank or Bank of America, whoever it might be, The realtor is what I call a market participant. They are a stakeholder in the market. They are a source of information. The best appraisers report very well, and meaning that realtors become a spot for us to interview extensively. So if I see a realtor's name in a particular market, and I can see that they're doing lots of transactions, they become a source of data for me. Now, my job is, if Susie, the realtor, tells me that, hey, properties that sit in this location generally sell for 10% more, can I take that and use that as a basis in the appraisal? Maybe, but generally I'm going to verify that, or I'm going to analyze that, and I'm going to look at different data points to see if that suggestive percentage is accurate. So a realtor can be a very good source to an appraiser, because they're the ones that are really showing properties all the time. But they're biased too. I mean, their goal, when you see a property online, if you guys went and read 5 descriptions online on houses, what is that online description supposed to do? It's supposed to make you feel good about that home. And that home may back to a busy street. It may need to be completely redone, but the role of that advertisement is to sell that property, right? So it's always generally the write-up on properties from agents are biased in a way of trying to move that home for the highest number. That's
you'll see the pictures too that come through, and like the angles that they hit those pictures, like, oh my gosh, that backyard looks huge. And then you go look at it, you're like, oh no, it's just where they were standing.
Yeah, and then you got AI, right? So you got all this technology that can take a photo and make a house look updated when it's really not. It needs a ton of work or whatever the case.
That's what Phil does with his social media headshot. He puts filters on so he looks better.
They look way better with AI. Who doesn't?
Okay, I got a question for you. So back in 2006, it was flying high. Market was going nuts, right? I mean, everyone was getting they were getting mortgages for way out of their budget and all that. And then that was kind of what caused the 2008 crisis and crash. So what was that time like, being an appraiser during that period?
Well, the good news is if you were an active appraiser, you were busy. So at that point in the cycle of modernization of appraisals, if you will, there wasn't a lot of digital appraisals being done. So meaning that there was automated valuation models being done, but the REO companies, once they started kicking in with all these properties, they really wanted appraisers going out and doing a lot of this. So we were super busy. I mean, it's some of the busiest time that we ever had. So we were very fortunate that volume didn't go down from an income level. However, the complexity of valuation was very difficult. Knowing how many investors own properties and the percentage of those likely go into foreclosure, because when you're doing an appraisal, you're looking at data today, right? Well, what's the anticipation of 30% of these properties coming to market in the next couple of months? That was the problem. We couldn't keep up with, hey, this effective date is today. 3 weeks from now, there could be another 5,000 properties on the market, which is going to lower the value because now you have all this additional supply and demand is surely at ground level. The only people who were buying were the smart, super smart investors that knew that this decline was just way too much and it would come back in the decade. I mean, the buying power was great. However, demand was really low. So it was extremely difficult related to producing accurate numbers at that time, just because there were so many investors on property.
I'm sure it did. Obviously the banks wanted to know when clients were going to short sale, they didn't want to go through the foreclosure process. They were trying to short sale. So I don't think their credit is hard, but it's still at a very low value. And the banks are probably like, hey, I don't want to lose my ass on this, but I need to, we need to get the homeowners trying to get out of this. My first home actually was a short sale. My wife and I got married in 2010 and we bought our first home, and it was a short sale property. And there was like $260,000 in Desert Ridge. And now, had I owned it and still own it, it's like a $700,000 home. Obviously, we sold it, moved, and did some things. But you're right. I mean, if you had savvy investors who realize that, you could buy a bunch of property at that really low number. And they rely on you on bringing together good appraisals and value at that time, which was so, I can imagine how complex that was.
It was very, very interesting market. And we all learned a lot, right? I mean, had we learned a lot before that, it would have been a much better situation. Especially, I'd like to be one of the more savvy investors where I'm buying property all the time. But
hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
All right. So walk us
Luckily,
through.
you recovered, man. Luckily,
Yeah.
I mean, if you held out, you did well.
Yeah.
It's crazy what the Valley's going through right now.
So walk us through the business side of it. So you ended up at the end of it. It was about 75 employees, I read, that's it's a big group, right? I mean, how long were you involved in the actual appraisals? And then a follow-up question, by the time you got out of it and had your team and they were kind of running that, what was it like running a mid-sized company of that size and nationwide? It wasn't just local Arizona.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, it's the best time of my life. So just to give you a real story.
So you miss it?
Oh, miss it every day. I had a real tough exit. I mean, mentally, I had a tough exit. I'm not going to give you the sugar cookies here and just tell you everything was peachy. Okay. I had a rough exit from a standpoint mentally more than financially. Financially, it was a reasonable exit, not the best exit financially, but yeah. So at our peak, we were 105 employees, but how we got there is a couple things. So you mentioned 06. So in 08, 09, I can't remember the exact dates, but from the crisis of the mortgage crisis, we had what's called, and give you how it used to work. So the bad part about the real estate transaction before 08 and 09 was that the loan officers were engaging the appraisers. And so if you didn't hit value, you were fired. I mean, so you'd have think about the people in our group that are loan officers, right? They would engage the appraiser, have a buddy-buddy relationship with the appraiser. And if the appraiser didn't do something, they would just go out and hire another appraiser. So there was a lot of bad processes and guidelines in place that I don't think appraisers, we were the problem in a sense. Bad lending was the ultimate root of the problem. But yeah, there were some bad appraisers, some people that went to jail that were really doing some stupid things. But ultimately what came out was what's called the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, which rolled it into Dodd-Frank appraiser independence requirements, which was a massive change to the industry where basically loan officers technically could not be involved in the appraisal process. So at that point, a lot of appraiser shops like mine were staff appraisers. So meaning I had myself, and I think at the time we had 8 or 9 staff appraisers, and we were busy. But what had happened, lenders had to change. So meaning that I could go take a lender to a pizza party, if you will, and get their business and woo them and go have meetings with them and show them how professional we were. But they had to shift how they were ordering appraisals. So the staff model got trampled on, and a lot more what's called appraisal management companies started to develop. Even though they already existed, that model started to become more popular because it became the firewall for lenders to engage appraisers. So I had to jump on board with that or potentially lose at least half my team. And I said, okay, that's the route we're going. And at the end of that, I started managing some work in different states. Long story short, licensing wasn't required in all states yet. It really was early on. And I had a lender locally here that tried some software, was having some failure. Communication was terrible. And he approached me. And Appraisal Tech became an appraisal management company off this one lender who, to today, I respect that CEO. If he calls me, I go walk his dogs tonight at 10 o'clock if he needed me to. So that's just how much respect I have for him. Wow. Just how it is. But that's how we were started. So we started from that lender. That lender was growing. They were growing in that bus because they were taking on loan officers and taking some risk. And we grew with them nationally. We started adding some clients. We were captive with large credit unions here. And, at one point we got up to 100 employees. And then all of a sudden, coming out of COVID, which was busiest time for the lending space because rates were almost zero. It's just, everybody was refinancing. Everybody was trying to buy. We were super busy. And then rates doubled. And I just saw the writing on the wall that, hey, I'm going to have to reduce 60% of my staff. And 2 things. It was a good opportunity for me to potentially exit just to save some headache. But number one, I was really going to have to lay off a majority of my team. And that scared the S out of me. I really did not want to go through that. I know some people are hardball CEO and they can manage that and go have their cup of coffee. But for me, that's a problem. So I approached.
It sounds like it would have gone against a core value that you had. And it's like, these are the people that helped me build this thing. So
yeah, and I don't want to paint that like I'm some phenomenal guy. I made a lot of mistakes with this company and the things I know now. Number one, joining a group like Junto and just grabbing some other leadership. I wish I could go back and add to that, but a lot of those employees are still employed at the company that acquired us, and I'm just super thankful for that. So that's really where it is.
That was a question I had that you brought up on the licensing portion and the requirement as you're kind of scaling globally and talent. So what did that look like building a team as you had that growth, and how did you manage the licenses for the states that required licenses, or how did that work out? Because I know that you got yours, but as you're building staff and retaining talent, it seems like it might be a small pool, and always curious how that works.
Well, Dodd-Frank ended up requiring that the states start regulating appraisal management. There's some things that came out, and the laws kept changing. The states had to adopt policies. So licensing was starting to come on board with all the states. So we had to be licensed. We were licensed, I think only 48 of the 50 states would allow licensing. As an example, New York didn't have an appraisal management law. So you really couldn't do appraisal management in New York for federally related transactions. So a couple things, you got to hire people with a skill set. So Arizona was obviously one of the first states that we got licensed in because they required it. And I went out and recruited people. And a lot of my time at that point was getting certain people on board. My wife worked in the office at the beginning. We hired somebody to replace her. That person stayed with me for all 20 years. I mean, I think she was with me for like 18 years, and she's still with the other company. And she was my right hand gung-ho person, would take my call at midnight, and just that kind of person. And obviously I have a ton of respect for that person still today. So it was really, we had to get certain things in place to be compliant, because if you got caught not being compliant, the states were brutal. And just give you an example, we weren't licensed in Iowa, and one of the mistakes I made probably like in 2017, 2018, if you will, I needed to go to a new software platform. We had our own custom software platform. Part of my growth was I developed this with somebody else. It offered a lot that nobody had at that time. But the problem is I couldn't keep up with other technologies entering the marketplace, and they just trampled my software. Yeah. And I made a poor decision not to jump ship, as some people on my staff tried to get me to do. I didn't do it. I got comfortable. And long story short, we accidentally ordered an appraisal in a state that we shouldn't have, and I got fined. In fact, that fine, as an example, it was only like $1,500, which call it a lot of money, what you want, but in the scheme of things, it wasn't a lot. But long story short, I had to file that complaint with every state that we were licensed in. So I had to lock down the person to go tell every state about this complaint, and then I would have to deal with their responses. And some other states fined me for that complaint.
Whoa.
So when you think about scale and
ripple effect.
And the mistakes, some of the mistakes I made was analyzing margin with this growth, because as more compliance came to fruition with these licenses, what also came about is the federal side of things, the appraisal subcommittee, if you will, required new aspects, that we have to pay for every appraiser we have on panel. I think at one point we had like 5,000 or 6,000 appraisers that we were contracting. So every one of them, we would have to pay a fee to the state, and the state would file that to the feds, and they, just another money grab, right? Well, you got to factor that into your margin. So how do you do that with your margin? You have to sit down with every client, raise fees. So
you almost need advisory consulting to even plan for that. But how do you do that without you're not going to have foresight to something like that. That's a real challenge.
Well, it's a challenge too. If you're a small business, are you taking loans to prepare for that, to make that planning and saying, hey, let's set an R&D team here to know that these things are going to happen. So, and then you hire a skill set, and good skill sets, 2018 to 2022, 2023 on our side were six figures at least, to have these people on staff, and we had a couple of them. But yeah, super difficult growing and scaling, but we did it. Look, we had a lot of successful years. I think the worst year for me was 2022, when rates were way high and we were at max employees, and it was time to scale down. And I just said, hey, it's time to give everybody a fighting chance. So Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing all this on the business side, and I can nerd out on these individual business topics, but I want to make sure we can shift gears onto the personal development side, since it's kind of the catalyst to this, but with Junto and everything, and getting to know you. First of all, the first lunch we had after you joined Junto was just so refreshing to sit down, and it was like we didn't really waste time with any of the typical BS ice breaking, which is, it's happened multiple times in Junto, but not like that. It's really notable. And we really jumped in to the, what's top of our minds right now, and just really appreciate about you, and not stuff, honestly, that we'd share on this podcast. But that aside, it was really evident we connected on development, even as I approached that lunch thinking this is a guy that's got a lot figured out, which you certainly have with the experience we've talked about so far in certain areas. But besides Junto, how are you approaching kind of your development for this next stage? I know you're having conversations with a lot of the guys and a lot of the guys outside of our group, but just looking at some of the influencers, I love that you show who you're following on LinkedIn. I'm only going to name two that really stuck out to me, one being Lex Friedman and Daniel Goleman. Yeah. But from a knowledge perspective, how do you find yourself really still sharpening the sword in this next chapter of your life, which I know you're approaching as a freshman?
Well, my number one resource right today, I know when we do these things, everybody talks about their favorite book and things like that. So my favorite thing today, which I think is growing, is the Peterson Academy. I think Jordan Peterson, I have a difficult time listening to him. And some people are like, what do you mean? He's so smart that I have to listen to his stuff 2 or 3 times. And some people, my wife, as an example, she listens to it at 1.5 speed. I have to slow it down. Okay. That's just who I am. Okay. I've got to retain it the right way. I love what he's doing with that, because I feel like I can learn so much from something different. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm studying Churchill right now. And when I learned about Churchill, the dude's a hero. Okay. I mean, like, just a brave dude. If what I'm reading is factual, which I believe it is, but he's got this whole class series on Churchill, and he's got a whole class series on, I think there's 50 courses in there. It's $300 a year. It's phenomenal. Look, I don't get paid anything to promote it, but, obviously a big podcast guy. I mean, I listen to multiple people. But what I believe the best resources for us all is other businesses owners that are in the trenches that just give you real world conversation. They don't come in and try to pep up that I'm a visionary, I'm a leader. And look, leadership, we all know on this call that leadership is much more than just reading a book. You got to go through some pains. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to learn. And the question is, are you really learning and then adapting and actually doing better the next day? I mean, that's all it is. But Peterson
banger.
Yeah.
That's what we call bamboo banger on the show.
If I feel like I need to get real smart, again, I'm going to listen to Lex Friedman. If I want to have a good time, I'm listening to Rogan or Sean Ryan. I mean, these are some guys that I think are massive influencers. I mean, it just depends on what's good for my mindset that day, what I'm turning on.
I'm bringing you a book on Thursday called it's a real nuanced thing on Churchill, which was why I loved it. It was called Dinner with Churchill, and how everyone talks about Jeffersonian dinners, but he was really intentional about how he hosted folks. Fun book. You can just pick up any page. Anyway, side note. Love that you're going down the rabbit hole on Churchill.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
there's a podcast that we like listening to. I'll throw the recommendation out. Founders by David Senra.
Okay,
definitely check that out. He's an autobiography junkie. Reads a bunch of stuff about all sorts of people, and then just shares his thoughts on it. And he reads parts of the book and then shares his thoughts on it. It's cool. I'm sure he's done one on Churchill. Phil would probably know that. But you obviously you mentioned your wife and you've got a family, and you now your kids are grown, I think, and you got some that are kind of all over the, they don't live here in Arizona, Michigan. I think you said your son lives, and what's that like? You're raising the family and now empty nesters, and this next chapter in your life, and are you doing a lot of travel, or what kinds of things are you getting into?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me coming out of the exit was now I'm by myself. I'm like, holy smackerels, we take for granted when we go into that office and we're surrounded by a team, what that really does to our mind and how fruitful that is. And I had a difficult time with that after the first 6 months. It was real challenging. I was now in the corporate environment. They wanted me to stay on the class. The company that bought us, very just great people that made great care of me, the team, very understanding because they've done this. They're private equity. They buy companies all the time. It's just like them tying their shoes, right? So they knew what the owner was going to go through emotionally, depending on who you are. And for me, I didn't realize how impactful that was to my life to now walk into an office. Where's my team?
They offered like programs to kind of coach you through that period.
Oh yeah, they had resources. Awesome. They had. I didn't take fully advantage. I didn't fit into their system the right way. It's just not for me mentally. I'm technically not a corporate guy. That's just not who I am. And I told you at the beginning, I quit being at the corporate office after not seeing my wife for 3 weeks. And it's just not how my brain's built. And call it what you want. Okay. I've got a best friend of mine who's in the corporate space and he's a super entrepreneur, smart as hell, and grinds it every day as a corporate guy, but he's also building car washes. I mean, the guy is crushing it. And I'm not that guy. I can't go work corporate and then go be Mr. Entrepreneur. So I wish I could. So I guess to fully answer your question and shorten it up is, I think anybody that's coming out of an exit, you have to know your own mental state. You have to know who you are, and you need to plan for that early on. I did not do enough of that. I didn't have a coach on my exit. Should have had one. I had people around me that were giving me advice, but not the independent advice that I needed. And to make a plan for me personally, like saying, hey, what is your next step? What are you going to do? You think you got this, but there's going to be some moments where you question what you did, and are you going to go down a deep rabbit hole that you can't get out of? Luckily, I feel like I've gotten out of it probably longer than what I should have taken, and some of that is having a great spouse that's super supportive of the situation. I've got another business partner now that's just phenomenal and knows some of that pain, and I've got a good circle in Junto. Okay, I mean, honestly, when I first got the Junto, dude, I was like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm going to contribute here. I'm not in the right headspace. Phil, as you know, as we went to lunch early on, so I was really not in the right headspace to go in and kill it with all these super A guys. So
you bring up such a good point on the exit coaching piece and some of the conversations that we've had that have been the most valuable for the guys that ideally want to experience that. It's kind of a be careful what you ask for. And we hear, if you're doing your research, you hear some of these stories, but it's different when you're in it. So it's really interesting to hear you go think through that, and potentially a way you're going to be able to help a lot of people in the future, at least from the approach of thinking through it.
Yeah, and I would tell everybody, I don't care how good you think you are, have somebody independently, not independently just from the mental side or the personal side, but the financial side. Like, hey, let somebody else, I mean, if you built this company, you're emotionally attached.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that's going to make clouded decisions, right? We all know that. No matter what we do in life, if we're emotionally attached to something, we may not make the best decision. It might be the best decision.
Back to the real estate too, right? The emotional one tied to what probably the biggest business decision investment people are going to make. It's emotional, but sorry, continue.
Right. 100%. So I think if I could go back in that space, I would have that person or team really pushing me to follow a rigged outline. And that should be part of your daily routine, is studying that and making sure you're adhering to that as you go through an exit. And you may decide not to exit, or you may decide, hey, I'm only exiting if XYZ happens. So I would encourage that on anybody. Everybody wants to hear about the financial, the money side. But the question is, when that money lands, where are you at? You know, to make sure that you get your money, great, but let's just make sure you don't fall off a cliff. Or maybe the money's not as good as you think it is right now. Maybe you need to hold out and do it.
So you bring up a good point. And the thing that, we talk about a lot on this podcast is purpose and purpose-driven work and what's our North Star and finding our path and staying in alignment with all that. And that was your path for 25 years, was this business. And, building something great. And then, all of a sudden, like, I think what you're trying to say is when that goes away, you still have your North Star in life and what you want to try to accomplish for yourself, for your family, the legacy you want to build. But when what you do spend most of your hours on, when that goes away, how are you going to backfill that and be prepared to have those opportunities and work ahead of you to make sure it's something that you really want to do? And it sounds to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this kind of came fast for you, this exit. It wasn't necessarily planned. It was kind of market driven, and you were, weren't sure what it was going to happen. And then the opportunity presented itself and you said, okay, let's go. So from start to finish, when the offer came or when the idea came to when it actually closed, was that quick? Did it seem really fast?
I guess you could say it is, depending on, you probably get different opinions on this. I think it's more the company that bought us, they're in this business, so they really only want the assets, so it's a little different, I think, than if you were buying a company and you don't have that foundation built, you're buying everything with that company. So I think it would have taken a little bit longer, but since this company really understands the business, they are after our team and they were after our clients. That's it. They know the business model, great leadership, all that stuff. So I think it took about 6 to 7 months, and they turn over every stone. So, no matter who you are, if you're selling something 7-figure plus, attorneys, accountants are going to unfold everything in your business. And that's another reason why you want to have a great team. And luckily I had a phenomenal CFO. I had a good COO. And so I had all these people around me, luckily, weren't my coach, but were very skilled at managing that process. And we were able to get through it a little bit more efficiently. So
what do you got going on now? I know you and I have had some conversations, and you've got the entrepreneurial gene in you. What's next?
I do, but it's I'll tell you, it's more difficult now. You hear people say, hey, they make the money, and then now it's easier. I think some of that's true, but the challenge is now you've either got to start something from scratch or you buy into a model. So, a couple things we're doing. I own a couple retail stores with a partner of mine, number one, and he is the main workhorse around that, which is phenomenal. He actually exited the mortgage industry. Very smart guy with numbers. He's doing great with it. And those are doing okay. There are some things that we failed in vetting that acquiring in that business, ironically, another learning curve. But we've been able to recover and still make that work from a profitability and keep the business running well. We also have a contract currently, and this is our third contract, believe it or not, on some logistics/delivery routes. So all these trucks you see on the roads out there, UPS, FedEx, and Amazon, each company has a different leg of how they run things. And FedEx, most of the routes are independently owned. And just for full clarification, if anybody's listening to podcasts, I'm not the super expert on this. I'm 8 months into this of learning about this. So if somebody comes on and challenges my comments, they might be 100% right, because there's people that have been doing this for 15 to 20 years. I've actually interviewed a couple people that have done that, but it's an interesting business model. So a lot of these trucks that you see dropping off packages to houses are independently owned. You have a relationship with FedEx and a contract. You play by their rules. The business model is not extremely difficult. In fact, all the coaching, believe it or not, that I've hired some coaches related to this, for people coming outside and into this business new, generally overthink it because they always are analyzing how to improve the model. FedEx is super smart. This is obviously a worldwide company with geniuses on staff that have literally probably thought through the processes that you're trying to think you can make more efficient. So it's an interesting business model, and we're early on in that vetting, and we've got a contract on a route here locally in Phoenix, and it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but it is a way to have good income with your money out there. And if you run the business in a healthy way and you support FedEx and their brand at the highest level, I think you can do really well. So that's one piece. We've got a land contract on a property in Safford to do an RV park. And the front half of this parcel is zoned commercial, which could be gas station, car wash, things like that. Our appraisal, speaking of appraisal, came back way lower than our contracted price. So we are in the middle of negotiating that, and the seller's not very happy. So that deal may blow up, but I've learned a lot. We hired a consultant because I've not built anything like that. I've been around it, but not physically done it. And you can get your hand slapped and lose a lot of money real quick if you're not have the right people. So we had a consultant that the realtor partner in our LLC had known and brought us in and educated us fairly quickly. So pretty cool thing there. I've got some remodels going right now, building house in Lower Arcadia. That's finally going well. It's 2 years, learned on that. Look, I failed at a pizza place in Pasadena, California. I got my MBA there, lost a lot of money doing that business. So not everything's rosy in the entrepreneur space.
Yeah, well, you definitely got some cool projects, that's for sure. Keeping yourself busy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And when we talk about that, perfect way to kind of round up as we approach time, we talk about a lot on this podcast and in Junto about the time and energy portion, right? Money's kind of the byproduct. Like you said, we all want to talk about the money. That's how we keep score. That's how we are monitoring that for sure. But the time and energy piece that's what I'm focused on personally. The money always comes when I'm managing those first two right. And so we talk about the concept of the business athlete. We've been talking about that in Junto. I actually think that Steven and I started throwing that out there because I'm not sure where we found it. Doesn't matter. But this concept of the business athlete, listeners, you probably can't tell, but Robert's jacked. I think I said that to Gallagher the last meeting. Like, man, Oglesby's jacked, man. He's hitting it. Want to talk about that? You obviously embody it. I also know we've had a side conversation about that you used to dabble in some jiu-jitsu. So has this always been a part of your life? Has fitness always been a part of your life with those outputs of energy being the main thing with everything that we've got going on? But talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, the military really put that in me. I mean, but working out solves a lot of my mental flaws. Let's just put it that way. Okay. If I don't get a workout or two in a day, I'm in deep trouble. So probably should go into a hole and not come out till I can go back and work out. Okay. Just to be real. But, I was telling, we had a team member at the retail store. I kind of run the HR side of things. And this person's having some struggles, young guy. And I sit down with him and said, hey, look, don't overthink this. Let's talk about your schedule. Let's talk about what's going on. And he used to hike. He used to do all these things, and he's not doing those things in his life. He's working 2 jobs, but he's not taking the time out to work on himself. And so I think when we understand our bodies, we understand our brains, and we understand what makes us work the right way, if we don't work on those, we're going to fail. I don't care how smart you are or how great of an entrepreneur you are. If you're not doing that and carving that time out, it's a challenge. You're not beneficial to your partners, your team, or whatever. And so with this guy, we sat down and said, what are some of the easy things we can do? And I said, man, all we have to do is just start. And if we just start, everything gets better over time. And I said, man, just go take a 10-minute hike. Go take a 15. You love to hike. You just said it. I don't like to hike necessarily. I will. I'd rather go to the gym or go for a run, but I'll go hike, whatever. I like to do certain things, but it's not my go-to. But if that's your go-to and that makes you happy and it brings some positive energy in your life, go do it. So, I mean, working out is just a mental thing for me more than this physical, Phil. And I've also learned that diet is it's the gold standard. Like, I hate to say it. And not to get political, but I do believe a lot of our foods have problems, and we have to control that to be successful in our minds. For me, it's just
I'm really bullish on the direction we're headed there, even though it's a very big hill to climb, the food industry, the way it's set up, but I'm bullish. It's a big passion of mine. Yeah,
good, clean food. It sucks that not everybody has access to that. Like, I think that's a real challenge for us to improve as people. The more good, clean food that we can bring to everybody, I think we'd be better mentally. I think we wouldn't have as much road rage. People driving cars, you probably say to McDonald's, man, no wonder you're feeling like shit. Excuse my mouth. Calm down.
It's so
You know what's crazy is so McDonald's, they just had earnings and they were talking about their Q1, and they actually they're in a downtrend. There's like them and Chipotle are like two of the main. I think Domino's was another one. Like some of the main players where people follow the market and how they're doing, and they're in a downtrend. Like I think there is some shift. I think also pricing is probably the dollar menu isn't as impactful as it used to be. But single ingredient foods, like I've been on a path for the last couple of years trying to figure that out too. And it's definitely hard. What is it? Simple, not easy, Phil, is the phrase we use. But recognizing that, it's just bringing awareness to it. And whatever you eat the night before, how you feel the next day, learn from it either direction.
But you can tell the way you're talking about it, Robert, it's just table stakes for you. Like you put this together, but some folks, the reason we repeat it all the time is we had to learn it the hard way too. When you're not mapping your state to how much you moved or what you ate, the only thing we missed is sleep, which is pretty much the easiest thing you can do. Again, simple, not easy. Go to bed and wake up at the same time-ish. You get those three things dialed in. It's just life can be so much more clear is what we like to get at almost to ad nauseum on this podcast.
It truly is. It's, Phil, you do a great job for us in the sense of the meditative state. I really never went down that hole. My wife's tried to push me to it a little bit. I'm still not doing a great job with it, but you've helped. I've practiced some of it, but it's carving that time. And, give an example. We went to lunch today and one of the members is struggling at work, not work, but just getting deals in. Steve, you might know who I'm talking about. I won't mention his name, and I'm thinking, man, those are the times when it's very difficult to stay in a routine when stress is on you. If you can master that as an entrepreneur, leadership, whatever you do day in and day out, when you have that down day, maybe you lose a project, you lose a client, whatever it is. I wasn't great at that at the prime of my company. And I wish I had like the Junto group or other people around me. If you're in that spot as a leader, you've got to do that. You've got to figure out on your darkest days how to manage your time right, because that's how you're going to win and recover from that at the highest level. It really is.
I love it.
It comes down to your routine, the identity shift that you've developed for yourself, right? Like nothing gets in the way when you put in that 1 hour of work a day for yourself, and then whatever else happens outside of that, at least you've got that, right? And then you know that everything's temporary. The bad days are temporary, the good days are temporary. Just be consistent with what you got. So I love it, Robert. We appreciate you jumping on, and thank you for your service. I didn't realize you were in the military. What division were you in?
Yeah, I was in the Navy. Yeah, I was in the Navy as an Air National Guard. Yeah, love it.
My cousin's out in he's stationed in Japan right now. He's been in the Navy 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah. We got a lot of family in the Navy. So thank you again for your service. We do also like to end the podcast with one final question. And what does success mean to you, Robert?
I think success comes when you come home and you can put a smile, or however you want to call it, and you can look at yourself and you can look around, and then not necessarily be material things, but you can look at and feel like you've done a lot of good. When I look back at the exit from appraisal tech, there are things that I would definitely do differently, but it was a successful exit because we kept a lot of people employed and we kept a lot of clientele without having disruption. And that's success. And I think every person has to look at it. We talk about these balanced scenarios of life, right? Hey, are you balanced with your family? Are you balanced with work? I don't think you can ever have a perfect balance. I think that when you're not successful, the people around you move away from you. And I've had problems with that because I get strung into work and my head goes to work. And I have the personality where I can be mentally disengaged with the people that I need to be more engaged with that may not be part of my job, right, or part of my company, or my family, or whoever it may be. So I think success ties all that in, how you can really sit back and say, hey, I had a crappy day at work, but I can come home and shut it off, and I'm going to give the right time to the people that are important to me. and then go back and conquer tomorrow and fix whatever's going on. So
that's a great answer.
I don't know if that's a good answer. Look, it's
your answer.
It's amazing as we get older, right?
Yeah.
We get 49. I'm 49, almost 49. All right. I got to save my 2 months here before I'm 49. I wish I had that when I was 23. Let's put it that way.
This has been a real treat. Thank you again for joining us. Thanks for just being a friend. Love the hell out of you. And listeners, we'll be back at you next week. Real quick, we're going to put Robert's LinkedIn in the show notes. Robert, is there anywhere else they should look to find you?
You can go to appraisal1.com. Yeah, but you can drop my cell if you want. Anybody can call me if any questions. And appreciate you guys, man. Thanks for having me. What an honor.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Back at you next week.
Thanks, guys.